All right, welcome back to Trail and Ultra Running Training. My name is Will Franz. I'm a running coach and a strength coach, and the whole goal of this podcast is to help you get a little more information so we can train better and run better on the trails. And today I'm going to talk about core stuff. This is going to be part five in our strength training series. The first of which were about like squat and push and pull and deadlift, and whatever. And today we're going to talk about core stuff. And if you appreciate the information, I'd really love it if you did the subscribe and share and follow and whatever nonsense. Anyway, so today, core stuff. This can mean a whole range of things. And in fact, when I was typing in the title for this, my phone tried to autocorrect it to both cute and cure before it went to core, because I rarely use the term because it's just not very specific or helpful. All right. But it can be useful if we define it and like make it make sense. So in general, I think of the core is anything like any musculature that comes between the rib cage and the pelvis and kind of keeps you upright, which really includes a whole lot. Because a lot of the time when we say something like train your core or train whatever, we mean your six pack or your eight pack, your rectus abdominis, this muscle that goes from the bottom of your rib cage down to your pelvis. And that's really all we think about. And I mean, abs alone, we have five ab muscles, whatever that means. And one of them we can't really train, but the other four are going to be trained specifically and differently if we care about them, especially if we have some kind of deficiency. So let's talk about the ab stuff first, since we're there. Um, First is going to be it's called your rectus abdominis or that eight pack muscle. And what it does is flex your spine. It brings your rib cage and your pelvis together. And this is where we end up with like sit-ups, crunches, reverse crunches, hanging leg raises. Anything that does that motion is going to be your rectus abdominis. And it's really valuable. It's probably a little more of a like shiny muscle than many than we necessarily need. We don't need a like rippling eight pack in order to run well, but one, it can look nice depending on your preferences. And two, we do want to actually be able to control the pelvis. All right. So this is where this can come in, be valuable. We are talking about this. I've talked about this with running form in the past. And if your pelvis is constantly in this like forward anterior tilt, then like if your butt is like pushed out and your hips are dropped forward, then you're not going to be able to run super well because we're not stable enough to be able to push back with our glutes. So the big shining thing of something like a rectus abdominis or your eight pack would be really being able to create a little more of that pelvic control. So some reverse crunches or hanging leg raises, as long as you're coming and rounding the spine on the way up, can be super valuable to train the midsection. Further in the abdominal muscles, we have the obliques. We have a couple set of these. They go both direction, like they come down and in, and then down and back, depending which ones we're talking about. The external obliques are on the outside, and they come down and in, and the internal obliques are a little deeper. And they go down and back and attach to your back. And these muscles create rotation, like lateral stability and lateral flexion, which means anything that like rotates or goes back and forth like a weeble wobble means that you are going to be using your obliques. And they're super important for runners for multiple reasons. For one, they at running, you use your obliques with every step. Your pelvis moves, you rotate, your pelvis rotates, your leg moves forward, your arm comes back. And your obliques are very engaged when you're running, so they need to be somewhat strong. So you're training them in some fashion of like a cable oblique pull or a Russian twist if we don't have some cables. We can use bands. We can get on a decline bench and do a twisting setup where you bring your shoulder up to your opposite knee. Any of these things that create rotation are going to be useful. Now, there are some oblique movements that they probably don't work the best, right? It's not that they don't work the obliques, it's that they don't work the best. So anywhere where we're only working in this like lateral flexion plane, and I think of a dumbbell side bend where you hold a dumbbell or a weight down by your side, and then you just bend back and forth, these are probably not the best for the obliques because they don't create any twist. They just create that lateral flexion. They can help with another muscle, which we'll get to in a minute, but they're probably not the best oblique exercise. But anything where we're creating twist and rotation and putting that under some kind of load is going to be a really good oblique exercise. Now, for the last muscle we care about, because the fifth muscle in your abdomen is called your pyramidalis and it's down in your pelvis, and you can't really train it, and it's just there. It just exists and does its thing. So your transverse abdominis is like your weight belt, right? Like if you think of a power lifter wearing one of those weight belts, your transverse abdominis or to your TVA is your like innate built-in version of that. And this is a muscle that a lot of people have problems with. If you've ever been pregnant, then and you've had something called diastasis recti, and I always mispronounce that. I'm sorry if I failed again. It means that your abdomen has separated, and it's partially due to a separation in your transverse abdominis. And you'll also see that in like people with a big beer gut, right? Like it doesn't necessarily need to come from pregnancy, but it regularly does. So training in a way that will help your transverse abdominis stay strong and stable is a good thing, or to rebuild it, because it is naturally supposed to release and relax and maybe create some separation if you're creating a human. But once you're done creating a human, then we can get that thing strong again so that you're stable and we don't end up with a hernia, right? So this is going to be more of a pulling in motion. I think of this as like I put my fingers all up and down my abdomen. So like from my rib cage down to my pelvis. And then I try to pull away from them with my muscles. Now you can pull away from them using your lungs, like completely creating a vacuum and vacating all the air in your lungs, but we can also pull back using our muscles. And that is a great way to train your TVA or your transverse abdominis. This would be called a TVA vacuum. And bodybuilders are really good at this. Now, they will also get even further by vacating the air of their lungs, but we can do this muscularly and it can create a lot of stability and support. And it's not a particularly strenuous movement. It can be difficult because we might not have connection to that muscle, but it's not going to be particularly strenuous. So this is a thing you could do almost every day if we're trying to rebuild connection to that and rebuild some support from our internal weight belt. So we have our rectus abdominis, our like shiny eight pack. We have our obliques. We have a our TVA, and these are the muscles that we really care about when it comes to our abdomen. And this is what we talk about when we think core. But it's only like 180 or 270 if we include the internal obliques in of our body. So we should finish the entire rotation and think about our back, because our back muscles, these like deep intrinsic muscles of our back, also are very responsible for keeping us upright. And depending on how we train ourselves, we might not be training them super well. Traditionally, you think about things like a Superman, where you lay on the ground and you pick your chest and your legs up off the ground and kind of fold yourself together backwards. Is that, or you may even do like a 45-degree back extension where you're flexing upwards. And there's just a deep misunderstanding of how the like deep muscles of the back work when of how they work, period. And that is not really training them very well. Because when we look at these muscles, right, like there are the lats, they're these big wings that come down our back. They're a little more, and they can function for one as extensors of the back. So you might just be training your lats. It's actually pretty likely that when we're creating this like forceful engagement, especially for something like a Superman, where we're just a little bit on the ground and not really putting our body under any actual load, that you're probably just training your lats in a fully shortened position, right? So that's kind of not what you're looking for, because we can do that better with something like a row. Now, in a 45-degree back extension, you might be doing it a little bit, but probably not enough, because when we look at these deep intrinsic muscles of the back, your multifidus is what protects your spine. Your erector spinae is what we hear about a lot, and it connects down by your pelvis and then comes up in like three three branches and connects all the way up towards your neck, and it keeps you upright. What these muscles do is they prevent flexion. So just like your rectus abdominis creates flexion, just like your eight pack brings your pelvis and your rib cage together, these muscles of your back prevent that. So in order to train them, we need to probably put them in a circumstance where uh, gravity is trying to fold you in half. And if we understand a little bit about anatomy, we can train better. I realize like not everybody wants to be super nerdy, but basically the way that your nervous system connects to your muscles like is can be two branches from your spine, and there's a front one and a back one, and these muscles are innervated from the dorsal root, the back one, which means they don't really create force. They just respond to input. So if you're trying to create a lot of force with these muscles, it's just not how your brain communicates with them. Your brain communicates with them by like they're more of a response mechanism. So you just put yourself in a position where it has to do its job, and then it will get stronger. So if we think of something like a 45-degree back extension where your hips are on a pad and you're coming up and down, it works because you're consistently loading under gravity and these muscles are having to do their job. Other things that work for this as well would be like a really heavy bent over row. We take a bar, we hinge forward at the hips, and we pull back, and your body is going to, or these muscles are going to have to work if we're going to stay in a good position. Now, it may not always feel great. Like this is the thing with working these muscles. Few things will ruin your day more than like overtraining your intrinsic back muscles because where like your quads are sore and it kind of sucks to go up and down stairs, when your core is sore 360 degrees, it hurts to like pick up a pen. So go a little easy into these things. Be safe. Like don't hurt your back. I try not to be the fear monger in the gym because very honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it is hard to get injured in the gym. I see so many people do so many things in the gym, and very few of them ever really get hurt. It is difficult to get injured in the gym if we have some cognizance of our body in an effort to use good form. So go ahead, try some barbell rows. We can do some like stiff leg deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, anything where you are in a like bent over position, picking something away from the ground is going to be really good for these deep muscles of your back. And that is how we're going to get stronger in the low back. So there's probably more to say about the core here. We can talk about like the hip flexors and we can talk about how your lats actually work to keep you upright. But I'm gonna ramble on for about 15 minutes for what's usually kind of an add-on for things. So if I think about some movements that tend to be really helpful here. One would be sit-ups and actually, sorry, one would be like a reverse crunch where you're pulling your pelvis up off the ground. And that trains your rectus abdominis and it helps you reconnect to the like movement of your pelvis in a like posterior tilt or upward fashion. I like them a lot. They're included a lot. If we need something that is a little harder, then we could go for a hanging leg raise. But do not come up just from your hips. Actually roll your spine up into the air and roll it back down. And that will help you get the benefit of that motion. Otherwise, you're just training your hip flexors, which are probably pretty strong anyway because you run up mountains. Now, we also have the obliques. Again, these create rotation. And I said I'd get back to a QL thing, which I totally forgot about. So we'll get to that in a second. So obliques create rotation. So some kind of twisting thing. You can grab a cable, twist across. You can do a decline sit-up where you twist up and across. We can do a Russian twist if we're like pinched for equipment and we just don't have a lot of time or space or whatever. Um, I also really like carries where you hold something in whatever position of your hands and you just walk for a while. And I like offloaded carries a lot. So you'll have like one weight up high and then another weight down low because it forces you to stabilize a little bit side to side. Because and this is where we're getting back to that dumbbell side bend. There's a muscle in your back called your QL, and it kind of works to keep you upright laterally. So if you put yourself in a like position that makes you want to fall side to side one way or the other, then your QL will do a good job. Now, same the kind of thing with this dumbbell side bend where we're letting it roll down our leg and then pulling back up and across. That will train your oblique a little bit. It will also train your QL. And that's probably what I think it's better for. We end up with like back stability and side to side um, hip problems, right? But we can also just do this with carries. If there isn't a big issue one way or the other, then we can just carry some weight in an unloaded fashion. It will also do a really good job. And it trains your obliques in the process. And then some version of a like bent over thing to work on anti-flexion. So this is usually not even a movement that I specifically program. I used to, but kind of moved up to where I try to get secondary benefits from a lot of movements because I realize that a lot of runners don't necessarily want to be lifting for 3 times a week for whatever, right? Nor do we have time, nor is it safe. We need to increase running volume so much that getting 3 hours in the gym is probably not reasonable. So if we can cross benefit a little bit, that's great. So with our back training, we can do a barbell bent over row, and that's also going to get those deep muscles of the spine or whatever we're looking for. Right. So some kind of flexion, where we tilt the pelvis up, probably. Some kind of rotation for the obliques, some kind of carry, and then some kind of bent over work that forces those deep muscles of the back to do their job. And that's really what I think about when it comes to core work. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that's helpful. I will say, like, you can try and include that pretty much every week, but it doesn't need to be on the same day. Like, just like I will often, especially for runners, not do like, I'll do a vertical pull one day and then a horizontal pull the other day. And this would be different if we were climbers, but we're runners. So we're just trying to train the upper body enough to help us run and stay like healthy for the long term. Same kind of idea with the core. You don't need to do dedicated oblique training multiple times a week. You can do the obliques like on one training day, and we can do the obliques and the like deep muscles of the back on training day one. And then we can do some like tilts and some carries on training day two, and it'll work just fine. Right. So you just think about getting everything in a week and making sure that we're hitting this on a regular basis so that we can make progress. A lot of people think you need to like lift 6 days a week or something in order to get strong. And if you wanted to become a bodybuilder and put on the most muscle mass humanly possible, then you probably do need to train like 6 to 12 hours a week. But if we're just trying to get strong to live a long, healthy life and run a little better, then you're going to be fine with just two 45-minute sessions a week where you go in and like really work hard. So hope that was helpful. I'm going to do a few more of these. Again, I thought I was going to do five because this is the end of kind of the traditional movement concepts. I also want to talk about power and stuff and like some stability and mobility, and then how to actually build a program. So we'll be doing these for at least 3 more weeks. Have a great rest of your day and go have some fun on the trails.